Well, here's something I'll ask. If you're okay with it, let me hold your feet to the fire in front of 500 people, right? Um, would you be okay if I talk just a little bit about some of the like medical training we've been doing, sort of the state of medicine in the Ukrainian armed forces?
Please go. Please tell
Okay.
them.
So the takeaway is that it can always be better. I'm trying to be positive here. So the group that I work with, Global Augmentation, registered 501c3, go donate taxes. We've done a lot of things. They were doing medevacs and Bakhmut and other areas. Right now, the focus is training Ukrainian soldiers in what's called TCCC, TC3, or Tactical Combat Casualty Care. If you were in the military, you've experienced this. If you were a civilian EMT, if you've ever taken something called a Stop the Bleed course, you've also likely experienced it that way. Now, there's a number of factors. This includes just things like how to use a tourniquet, how to, put on a bandage, how to evacuate someone. The Ukrainian military does have a training program. It's not great. The Russian program is dog shit, absolute garbage, and their resources suck. But the Ukrainian program is death by PowerPoint, especially when you're dealing with a massive scale of guys. They lost a lot of medics because, and it becomes a larger issue when you have new guys who they see their brother in arms get shot, so they run out of the trench. And that actually happened to a guy I trained just a couple of days ago, and he just got fucking blasted in the face, and so he's dead too now. Because you don't have enough time with these guys to really drive into them like you are an asset, and so all these groups are training medics and they're doing a good job and they need to train more medics. That takes some time. You cannot train a medic in a day. Anybody who tells you that is lying to your face. You can't even train them in a week. You can train somebody to put IVs in people in a week if they've done another 2 weeks of previous training on and understand the anatomy. We're not really doing that. We are training each individual combat soldier in what's considered all service members level, or the basics. It is in the United States military, it's an 8-hour course. We can do it in 8 hours. The Ukrainians learn fast. They really do. And they understand it, and it's just practice, practice, practice. And there has been tremendous benefits. At least with one unit, and the numbers may surprise you. The wounded in action to death rate was less than 50% of the people who got wounded survived. Let me just put it there. Not the guys who got killed right then and there, because that happens, and there's nothing I can do to change that when somebody runs into a PKM or has a mortar dropped on them. But casualty evacuations in at least a couple of these TDF units just didn't happen. People sat in the trenches and just rotted for 3 hours. And then, surprise, surprise, even if you get out to a hospital, you're dead. They put a tourniquet on wrong, and you bleed out. And, the guy died because he had an e-cigarette in his pocket. So smoking kills because the tourniquet didn't clamp down the artery enough and he just bled out all over the fucking place. The people who take this training, and there is statistical evidence from the U.S. military suggests it, going back 20 years, I had read it, I had believed it, but, it's a scientific paper. I've worked on scientific papers before. How accurate can it be? I can tell you with 100% certainty that just the bare minimum of how to deal with massive bleeding, how to deal with respiratory distress, it changes things. We have guys who are assaulting trenches where, yes, the guys who die. Okay, the dudes who get shot in the face, they die. The dudes who get wounded, the last group, 100% of them survive. Now, unfortunately, that's an outlier. It's not always 100%. I wish it was. But the difference has jumped from being less than 50% survival to over 90%. And it's just, I wish I could tell you that I was exaggerating it. I'm glad it's happening. I'm disgusted that it had to happen in this way. I wish that the bare minimum standards were higher. But that's what happens when you take a military of 250,000 and you turn them into a 1 million man army. Actually, if you scroll up, that's a funny picture, that car that got all jacked up. So, yeah, I can talk about this one. Some guys of mine, I paid like a couple $100 to repair a medic's car, which is why it's got medic plates on it. Literally the day before. Guy brings it back up from a town in the south, and I said, oh, that's great. We have, 2 vehicles now. We can use one to drive supplies down south to a person around Avdiivka, an American medic that Andrew knows. Great. So I send 2 guys down there, and I trust them. I know where they're going, and I call them, and they don't really know the front lines. They don't use Andrew's map for everything like I do. And so I call them. I say, hey, so how are you feeling? They go, oh, our car broke down, and we're going to get picked up by this person. I go, oh, that's fine. Where is it? Oh, you had some engine troubles. You had to walk a bit. Fine. Send me a pin. And they drop me a pin on top of the fucking counteroffensive. Not in the counteroffensive, but like way too close.
It's pretty close.
Yeah. And I was like, that's not accurate. You sent me the wrong pin. They go, no, that's where it is. I go, why in God's green earth are you in Zaporizhia? It's like, what the fuck are you doing, my guy? And they're like, well, you see, and they kind of slow rolled it out. Like, well, that's fine. I only learned later they'd gone like to the trench line to go help and do some stuff, and they dropped off a bunch of really good medical gauze that got used within like 10 minutes. The counteroffensive is bloody. I'll detract from the positive part of the story real quick. Counteroffensive is horrifically bloody. You guys have no fucking idea. But that's what happens when you assault defensive positions. So they dropped off a bunch of medical supplies. Now they get it like towed back. They're actually walking past tankers heading towards the trench line, and it's like 11 o'clock, 10 o'clock at night now. And the tankers are like, "What you guys doing here? You okay there, buddy?" And the local military, police group comes over and is like, "Oh, okay, you guys are a bunch of foreigners, with this medic thing. Like, we'll help you." They tow the car back up to some place. They then they leave. What I didn't know is they had a bunch of our supplies in the back, and the guys were tired. They had just, they're listening to shelling in the distance. They weren't thinking, and so they left all the stuff in the ambulance, or this medevac vehicle was an ambulance. Car gets towed. They go back the next day. They try and start it. They can't. They go to tow the vehicle, and like 20 kilometers up the road, now like outside of at least mortar range, the car like blows a tire. Cool. Well, this car wasn't properly maintained by the guy who was lending it to us, basically. So the tire's so rusted on they couldn't get it off. So they leave the fucking car again with all the stuff in the back of it. Come back the next day, car's been broken into, everything's been taken. Several $100s worth of power banks that they really shouldn't have had in there has been taken. They stole the battery out of the front of the car, which was pretty funny. They just Mad Max the whole
Yeah, they stole everything.
They stole everything. They stole the car the next day.
They took the car too?
They took the car too.
It's like, they're not using it, it's mine now.
No, it's pretty funny. Like, they just keep coming back and scavenging more. And the joke within you're like, week, you're going to see that car, like, strapped full of explosives rolling down a hill in Zaporizhia somewhere. But I had to slow roll the news to the guy who lent us the car. Because he was like, well, he understands, he's a soldier, and it wasn't his only car. I was like, so that car I fixed that you weren't using for the past several months, well, it turns out you may not be using it. He's like, well, it's been broken, I can go get it. I'm like,
no.
If you can find it. But it's a bit of a fun story.
They stole the car too. And I want to stress that this happened over the course of days. Like that. This is the important part. Is that
this was 48 hours? And I talked to some soldiers here, and the command sergeant major was like, "Yeah, what the fuck do you think happens?" He's like, "It's obviously a military car. Like somebody looks at it and he goes, yeah, there's like an unwritten rule. If it sits there overnight, like it's 50-50 toss. After that, it's just if your car breaks down, you should just leave the fucking keys in it. Either come back or get it, or leave the keys in it so the guy doesn't have to break the window. You're the asshole for taking the keys with you." I was like, well, I had stuff in there. I would like it back. It's like, no problem. So the only thing is you get a Lada, because nobody wants a fucking Lada out here. Because they just break all the goddamn time. But yeah, so fun story there. It does cost money, unfortunately, because we are trying to get another vehicle as I move. I've got like a group of about 10 to a dozen guys that I'm moving around the country these days. We have a lot of equipment that gets used up because we're training about 50 dudes a day in the basics, 35 to 50. The high water point was 80, which was, I'll admit, touch and go. We basically conscripted a bunch of medics to also help with the train because it's basic stuff. It's 5 skills. It's standardized. We're not doing it on the fly. We've been doing this for months now. But when we show up and when they're like, oh, well, you're going to have like, 30, maybe 50 guys, I'm like, okay, we've done 35. We've done up to 50. And we show up and there's like 80 guys. And then the drivers show up and then there's like 100 dudes just standing around. You're like, ugh. And then half of them have loaded weapons, man. That's always fun. The commander came over because they're doing their final drills, and we're teaching them you need to secure the area first. You don't just run out into gunfire. You get the guy out of what they call here, the red zone, the care under fire zone, czerwona zona. And then you get them to an area where you can actually render medical care so you don't all die. And they're all pointing their guns in a circle around, and it looks nice. And the commander comes up, and he's like, hey, the guns are all loaded, right? I was like, what? There's like, then you pull them out, and everybody's like, no, it's fine. And I see a couple guys like racking the slides of bullets flying out. I'm like, Jesus Christ. Because they're combat soldiers, right? So you tell them to clear their weapons, and they do. And then later on, they just, without thinking it, they just put a mag back in. And I'm like, it's frustrating. Fun times. Nobody's been shot yet, but the night is young. I have had RPGs get fired. They miss hills. There's one on the other side of a hill, and a dude just fired an RPG and just missed the fucking hill or something, so it sailed over and hit the hill near us.
It's fantastic game. Remember?
It was like.
Do you remember that video of the Russians using indirect fire RPGs?
Yes.
Now you've experienced it.
Yes. So this is. I don't believe anybody's been killed, so I can laugh about it. There have been a few occasions in the East where guys are like doing target shooting, and especially on lakes. I don't think they're allowed to shoot around lakes now because the bullets ricochet off and just fucking slam into things. And some dude got his tractor like riddled with bullets because a PKM just like bounced off a fucking lake and just like blasted his cabin. And the tractor driver was like fucking pissed.
Yeah, I would be too. that is awful.
Just like, yeah. But so we are training guys. We are seeing quantifiable increases in survivability. We're not to, if you do the statistics and you look at the casualties guys are taking statistically, there's about somewhere between 2 to 3 lives saved every day. Just the way it goes. That's the amount of people that are living because the medicine needs to be done in the trench. It needs to be done with the guys next to them. It's something that's not happening because Ukraine didn't have a strong pre-hospital clinical environment before the war. It just didn't exist the same way that ambulance services exist in, say, the UK or America. It was more like, well, we'll transport you to the hospital and we'll provide some care on the way. Yes, there was medics and paramedics, but it was more of a hospital-focused system. And that included itself in the military. The idea that every person is responsible for the guy next to them doesn't really exist, especially when you have a 1 million-man army of people you stood up over the last year. So guys get wounded, they sit in the trench because how do you evacuate when they're shown? There's no helicopter coming. We don't teach 9 lines of, maybe there's a helicopter coming to evacuate you this time. You're walking out. 9 times out of 10, you're walking out or you're throwing the guy in the back of a BMP or a pickup truck or something. And when people don't know what to do, they panic. And look, not to beat this point to them, watching your buddy die while you have you have a tourniquet and a bandage in your hand and you just don't know how to do them because you saw a slideshow 2 weeks ago, 5 weeks ago, but you have no fucking idea what was in that slideshow. They would do it in 90 minutes. Because you have to go learn how to shoot guns that day too. It is horrific for morale. Absolutely destructive. I think I included some of them in that thread, but I have a number of messages from units saying, you have raised morale. And then guys who will like send me pictures afterwards. They're like, yeah, we stormed the trench. Here's the POV. It's like, oh, Jesus Christ. But like, they're like, we feel like we can move now. Because they don't think they're going to die. They don't think like those 3 guys, so before somebody yells at me about the dude's bandage in the front, because I actually talked to his commander, I was like, well, good job, they all lived, but his bandage is all fucked up. The guy's like, actually, there's a piece of shrapnel under that bandage, like sticking into his leg, a big piece of it. So that's why they didn't put pressure on it, because it would have just like sliced into him more. I was like, oh, well, that's a very good reason not to do that then. I appreciate you not trying to amputate the dude's leg while I was on him. But just... I covered their faces there, but they're smiling. The dude, I think I've sent the picture to Andrew. Like, he can confirm it. The guy in the front is just like grinning.
Yeah, he's happy.
The guy's leg like fucked up. He's got like a solid piece of shrapnel in there. Because it's the idea that like there is a chance to survive. Imagine going into clearing a trench and you just know in the back of your head, if I get shot, I'm probably going to be like the last, guys where it was a coin flip whether they lived or not. Incredibly fucking terrifying. I wouldn't do that.
Nice.
I'm only a coward. I wouldn't do that. I wouldn't do that at all. But knowing that, like, okay, we've done this drill enough times. It's not just we did it once and we moved on, we checked a box. We did it 4 times. I have these guys do tourniquets like 8, 9 times over the course of the day. Until like they're cranking down on it, which breaks a lot of our tourniquets. That's why we're always asking for more. If you have cheap Chinese tourniquets in America, A, fuck you, don't send them to me. B, but please stop buying them. C, I love you, but there's a ton of them in Ukraine. Don't send more here, please. They're just, they get the capability and the knowledge and the sense of confidence, which you cannot replace. The idea that I am not destined to die here. Because, like there's dudes who, I'm going to die here. I'm going to go be Rambo. Most guys aren't like that. Most guys are like, I'm going to die here. I'm just going to kind of zone out and disassociate. That's not a good position to be in. And then we actually had one group, a whole group got so into it. They sent everybody up to like the engineers for the group, like the mechanics, to come and do it, because this is all service member course. It's something that if you're a cook in the U.S. Navy, you're taking this course, right? We're working on stuff for like higher level squad medics, but that takes a lot more resources and a lot more time. And sometimes we just get a day with these guys before they're back in the trenches. So I'm kind of rambling there. The takeaway.
This work is incredibly important. I can't even imagine going into combat without knowing these things. These are like, basic things that are required. You can't fight a war without this stuff, and it's everybody in the Ukrainian army needs to be taught this, and you're teaching them 30 at a time, sometimes 80 at a time.
So luckily it's mostly 50 now. 35. It's funny because Kyiv is great. I love it, but it's a swamp, man. You get stuck there, you'll never leave. And there are people there who they have really nice, classrooms and great resources, and they do tremendous work. Don't let me talk them down. And I've sat down with them, and they go, well, what's your experience? Say, we've been doing this. This is, a course catalog. This is the amount of people we train. They go, well, we'd like to keep it as a student-to-teacher ratio of like 1 to 8, 1 to 10. And I was like, man, fuck student-to-teacher ratios. All my homies hate student-teacher ratios. When I was in high school, we had one guy teaching 30. We'll be fine. And that's, a little flippant. We don't quite do it that way. We're very, very lucky to have good translators and the ability to essentially pull medics. And we have some guys from the medical brigade who are, Ukrainian speaking English, but we've done this training with them, 30 times now. They've seen it 20 some odd times. They know what's coming next. They don't need to even listen to us. And my guys speak a little Ukrainian too, at this point, at least enough to yell at people to put on a tourniquet better. So you can, and the Ukrainians learn fast. They're very motivated. All the talk about Ukrainians learning quick, it's not just positive propaganda. When guys realize that this is something that is directly applicable to their survival, they practice it. We have guys who had one dude, he snuck back into training like 2 or 3 times. And I was like, who's this guy? Like, what the fuck? And I recognize this dude. And one of the commanders goes over and is like, why are you here? And like starts yelling at the guy, and the dude's like, no, you don't understand. Like, my commander sent me back. It's like, well, but we're doing the same thing. Like, if you wanted to learn more, why didn't you raise your hand? Why didn't you tell us? Like, that we could teach you more. He goes, I didn't want to interrupt. I just wanted to. And he's like starting from scratch every day. And we're like, there's advanced courses, buddy. You could have just asked, like, here, go do this, like, squad medic course instead. But guys feel passionate about it. Now, not to put too fine a point on it, but we're pretty broke. Turns out losing a bunch of vehicles and paying for all your own medical stuff and not charging for people does help that, plus covering 10 guys in fuel. So, yeah, it's not sexy. It's not cool. It's not the same as I'm going to buy 12 million Chinese tourniquets on Amazon and FedEx them so they get to Ukraine in 6 months. Sorry. It's we're registered 501c3 in Wisconsin or Wisconsin, as it's misspelled on the website still. But if you can find it in your heart to throw a couple bucks, I mean, bro, I'll whore myself out and all my guys out for tourniquets at this point, because we're also getting to the point where we're issuing tourniquets to these guys. We started doing it. The really good medic down towards Avdiivka does it, where they check the guy's armor and they check their tourniquets and their first aid kits. I don't have the resources to supply 65 dudes, brand new recruits every week with a first aid kit.
Yeah, and it's a lot of money. Yeah, I mean, just to put that in perspective, that's like $12,000 a week or something, right?
Yeah, I can't. Well, I just can't do it. It'd be 65. We were able to get a bunch of tourniquets for one of the assault groups and give them out, and then be like, okay, like you're all going to stay an extra hour because these tourniquets are a little different. They're good ones, but you're going to stay with us an extra hour to learn how to use them. And the guys were like happy to do that. They're like, absolutely, please, because the Chinese tourniquets they break, and we lose like 5 a day, 6 a day, and we had a couple hundred when we came down here, but it's a lot less than that now. I can buy them for dirt cheap here, or I can just get them from units who have tons of them sitting there. The tourniquets themselves are actually not the rate limiting factor. It's the pressure bandages, because we reuse them. You know, the guys don't just put them on once. And unfortunately, but I want to have every guy during training have at least one per student, ideally no less than one per two, so they can practice. Because if you have one per like 5 guys, 4 dudes are standing around. We've got 8 hours. You know, we don't have time. We can't just stand around all day. So, especially if we're out in the open, right? So it's things like that. Emergency blankets. I just went and picked up 30 of them. Dropped a couple bucks on that out of my wallet, because we teach guys to package them every time for hypothermia constraints, and it's just, if things get destroyed. I mean, we're dealing with like 5 pieces of equipment here. As we set up the squad medic stuff, we're dealing with more. It's hard. Have you ever talked about the Turkish armor on stream?
I have not, no. Well, maybe like in passing, but not in detail.
Yeah. So there's a lot of armor here that's not great, or guys don't know how to wear it. And let me rewind back. This is not a failing so much of the Ukrainian system as if you went to quadruple the size of your military and then also was fighting an existential war, you're going to lose people and you're going to have brain drain. And that's just what we're dealing with here. Sometimes that manifests in guys just don't have stuff. Some guys, like, armor is like hanging down, like basically to their nipple line. And you're like, buddy, you have, like, your heart's up here. You have other things you need to protect. And so we've gotten to the point where it's like checking guys' armor, making sure it's tight. There's this like purple camouflaged Turkish armor, which the police like to wear out east, which actually makes sense for them. But the soldiers wear it, and it's actually very comfortable, but you can't adjust the straps for shit. And the reason I tell this story is we had a guy who he showed up, and we're just going down a line, like, show us your armor. Okay, you're good. Keep moving. Your armor's not good. Okay, go to that guy. He'll help you fix it out. Keep it moving. We got 120 dudes who are on base. And the guy comes up to me, and I'm like, okay, your armor's not fitting. And he sent him to a guy, and the guy just stares at him because we're like, well, can you tighten up on your shoulders? Like, I don't think so. And the volunteer who's with me is just staring at him for like 30 seconds. And the soldier, basically, poor guy, nearly had like a fucking panic attack because he's like, oh my God, I'm going to die. And then because he's like, well, do you have a tourniquet? No. Do you have a first aid kit? No. And the dude starts shaking. And I was like, what the fuck is this? I came over, and the translator's like, this dude's freaking out because he thinks that, his armor is shaky. He has no first aid kit. This guy's just going to die. I was like, whoa. Like, let's talk about it here. And then we gave him a kit of some stuff. But it's hard. And I will never have the resources that I would love to have. That's just not going to happen. I'm not going to pretend that yours truly is equipping, battalions and brigades. We can train about 1,000 guys a month right now with, one of our first months out in the Donbass full time. I would like to scale that up. That'll take time. I'm not going to be able to equip 1,000 dudes. That'd be $100,000 just off the top of my head. It's not happening. However, giving them the knowledge, showing them that, hey, there is casualty reduction. The unit commanders we dealt with, battalion and above, have seen this. My hope is that we can impress on them, we can impress on the brigades and senior commanders, hey, your guys die less when they take this training. Your medics know this training. You should dedicate 8 hours to this training per soldier as opposed to 1.5 in PowerPoint. and also make sure everybody gets even just a Ukrainian-made tourniquet, a Ukrainian-made pressure bandage, just so people don't bleed to death. And it reduces overall casualties by about 25%, is what we've seen. There's the purple. Yeah.
Yeah, there it is.
Comfortable, though. They're very comfortable.
Yeah.
Yeah, so if that's something you guys who are watching be interested in, we are running a fundraiser. Got a GoFundMe if you prefer that. There's a PayPal. Andrew's got my number. He can call me if there's questions. I'll send you guys photos of, the money you being used to buy things, which is the other thing. A big consideration is, well, why don't I just send stuff from America? High quality medical supplies? Absolutely. However, the Ukrainian economy is, to put it mildly, not great right now. And they do have a lot of things you can just buy here. They have their own Amazon sort of marketplace called Logistical. They have an eBay called OLX. They have another thing called prom.ua. You can buy things here for pretty cheap. I can get cheap training equipment for, like Chinese knockoff shit for like $4, for a bandage, a pressure bandage that I can use 10 times before it completely falls apart, right? Versus spending $10, $15 to get a good bandage in America, and then another $2 per unit package to get it mailed to Ukraine so it gets here in 2 weeks. It's not the most effective use of resources. It's not fun. It's not sexy. It's not the same as, well, I'm putting a stamp on something and I'm sending it to Ukraine and I know that my package is going hands. But sometimes the best thing you can send is good old-fashioned American dollars or euros. This is the first time. I've been here for a while. I've been working with this stuff in Ukraine since January of last year. This is the first time I've asked for money. And I promise you, it's not easy. If you guys want photos, you want videos, you can message Andrew. I'm on Twitter at Language Learner. A little St. Javelin thing. Happy to provide. We have a bunch more videos of the full trench simulations and whatnot, because all the medicine is done in trenches and nobody trains for that. They just train for a nice, quiet, calm field, and it doesn't work that way when you've got like a 2.5 square foot space that you have to now perform medicine on in the dark. And your name is John Q, Yevgeny, and you've got 90 minutes of training. It just doesn't work. And having a buddy die in front of you, especially when you don't know what to do, just kills your morale. Like, I've seen dudes who, there's going to be a lot of there's a reason Ukraine's talking about like legalizing medical marijuana, because there's going to be massive amounts of PTSD from this stuff. So, but I think I've kind of rambled on enough.
Yeah.
For that.
So in the description of this video, we have a link to Language Learner's Twitter account. We have a link to that tweet thread about everything, and that tweet thread has the links to everything else. So there's a PayPal, there's a GoFundMe, and a link to your or the information necessary for the 501(c)(3) or whatever it's called.
Yeah, 501(c)(3). Yeah, it's a real thing. I promise I'm not spending it on hookers and blow. There's not a lot of them out there. I haven't been able to find any, at least.
Yeah. So this is a very important thing, and I'm sure we will raise the necessary funding. It's
well, yeah, whatever it is fine. I mean, there's a goal, but at this point, for 10 guys, I'm really $2,500 to $3,000 a month allows me to subsidize everything, because we don't charge the units, and frankly, we've been doing it with a lot less. My hope is that if I'm able to score 10 grand, then that subsidizes us through until at least the winter months when things slow down and we're no longer dealing with the same pace of casualties. But look, man, if I can get a couple $100, it's better than where we're at now. So it's like there's very few things I won't do for money here. So if you're looking for a good time out in the Donbass, give me a call. I can't promise a good time, but I'll promise a cheap one. Yeah.
All right. So thank you.
Yeah. Well, thank you. And then thank you guys for everything. And seriously, the stuff Andrew does is phenomenal. The work he does, the people he communicates with, the information he provides is invaluable. It has already saved lives. I've directed it to humanitarian groups who are instead like, well, we're going to drive into North Kupiansk today. I go, but why do you desire to drive into artillery fire? Well, we need to deliver all these blankets. My brother in Christ, it is April. You should reconsider. Like, information is a massive weapon in this war. And Andrew's information is the best there is. Bar none, no bullshit. I've seen him since he was just kind of, for lack of a better term, fucking around on his own doing this. And he is bar none the best map you're going to get outside of looking at a Ukrainian commander's personal one. And they get real pissed when you post those on Twitter. You have to post them in Discord groups, is what I've heard about top secret documents.
Yeah, but, or War Thunder forums.
Or War Thunder forums, yes. I'm working on that, But anyway, with that, I'll get down off my soapbox. Thank you so much for having me. I hope now that I'm stepping away from more of an operational role into more of a management role here, I should actually have some time. Plus, there's no soldiers on this base right now, so I can just kind of hang out in the hallways and scare the fucking guy who keeps doing patrol outside every 30 minutes. And stand here and talk on my phone.
It's fantastic. Thank you for coming, and thank you to all the listeners.
Thank you, listeners. I know I dropped your counts by like 100 dudes, so for the rest of you who stuck around, sucks to be you nerds. Congrats, you got Shanghai, but thank you guys for listening. And if you can do anything, you just talk about it with people. Talk about this war. We have short attention spans in the West. Even just bring it up around the water cooler and be like, it's still a thing. There's still people bleeding out in the trenches in the hellhole. There's still people crawling out over this shit like it's, Passchendaele. Maybe, don't depress yourself. You've got a life to live. I'm not going to say everything stops in your life, but it reminds some of people. There's a lot of things going on in America. I try not to check the news there these days, but I know there's a lot going on there. There's a lot going on in the UK and everywhere else. Just, as romantic, stupid as it sounds, keep the flame alive. It means a lot to people here. Hearing that there's people from other countries that care about them, that's one of those big morale things. They go, we haven't been forgotten about. I'm sitting in a trench, I'm freezing my nuts off. I'm fighting a war I didn't want to fight that I have to fight, but there's people who are thinking about me, whether it's back home in, Venezia or across the pond in Seattle. And that means something to these guys. It really does. And with that, I think I'll leave you to it, brother.
All right. Well, that's the show. Thank you, everybody. And we'll see you next week on Tuesday. All right.
Cheers. Bye. Go Mets. Bye.
Bye.
Bye. Bye.